first step in a dream takes you further than 1,000 in this world. These nightmares can be ended. They can be conquered. Always stay clear in thought, even amidst intoxicating triumph.
Of justice, you are worthy. Receive our blessings, embrace our gifts, and rise, Ascendant. For this is the ending that we all deserve.
Now, let us see if you truly understand what it means to be Nightmare. Your head to a one true God. You and I are about to create the most beautiful of nightmares together. Let me show you what a real God can do.
Choose wisely. Trust completely. May you find the ending that you deserve.
What's up everybody, it's Victon here with my in-game build guide for a full Spectre build. And I gotta say right off the bat, this build is, in my opinion, a better mid to in-link build than Carrion Golems. It costs more to put together, but it's gonna double or even triple the DPS. Even with a budget version of this build, you're still gonna be doing more damage than you ever would with any current Carrion Golem build. That being said, with the nerfs to Carrion Golems this league, I do think Spectres are back on top as the best all-around build for summoners. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we start seeing a ton of people switch over to Spectres instead of Golems. As far as the build overview, we're rocking 5 Syndicate Operative Spectres, and they're all dealing insane DPS. I've tested the new Ultimatum Spectres and the other top Spectres out there, but Syndicate Operatives are still king. And as you can see from the gameplay footage, this is one of the best boss killers out there right now. At this point, I've killed every boss in the game, including a 110% quantity, the feared fight, and even that was an absolute breeze. We've just got over 45 million DPS at this point, and on top of that, we have our defenses at a pretty decent spot where I rarely die, and I'm leveling up pretty nicely. As you might know, Spectres have always had great DPS but lacked defenses. We solved that last league going CI and having a high energy shield pool, but with some of the harvest crafts changes and wanting to stay more a bit budget friendly, we're staying life this time around. Luckily, I've got a new strat with some choice cheap cluster jewels that completely change you feeling squishy and makes you feel actually pretty tanky. What's crazy is I'm pretty low level. I'm only level 94 right now, and I probably have only invested about half the currency I could into this build, so I've got another 30 or so million DPS I could squeeze out, and another 500 or so life, which probably at that point would be enough to where I just don't ever die by one-shots, which pretty much basically means I'm never gonna die. So this isn't a min-max build guide, but rather I'd say a mid-level budget build, and one that I do think is obtainable by most players with a little bit of work. We're going to be sticking around the 40 to 50 Exalt mark, but I will be going over budget items as we talk through the build, and also how to craft all of these items as well, so you can spend a lot less currency if you're into crafting. I started the build out with only having spent about 15 Exalts, and was easily clearing tier 16 maps while doing a few of my currency making strategies to make currency and upgrade my gear. As I got more currency and upgraded the build, the power level exponentially increased to where now I even insta-phase Cyrus Awakener level 9, so bosses are just absolutely nothing to this build. As I got more currency and upgraded the build, the power level exponentially increased to where now I insta-phase even Cyrus Awakener level 9. And did I mention the clear speed is actually super solid with Syndicate Operatives? Yeah, it's honestly just an all-around amazing build, and I've had a blast playing and upgrading the character over the last week. Now, as far as the build guide here, we're going to be doing a slightly different format, this being an in-game build, so I won't be going over how to level this up or anything like that, but I do have a leveling guide for a Spectre and Skeleton Mage build that I would suggest to play until you get to about yellow tier maps, at which point you can switch over to this build. That'll be linked in the video description below. And as always, before we dive into the guide, if you guys end up enjoying this, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for a ton more Path of Exile content just like this. I also have a link below my Twitch channel where you can come in and ask as many questions as you want. Honestly, love helping you guys out with your builds, so hit that follow button over there if you're interested. Also, if you're interested in supporting the channel, I have a link to my Patreon below, which is going to get you access to my community Discord, where I do personal build reviews all the time. We're just in there chilling, having a good time, talking about Path of Exile all day, every day. There's also a new way to support the channel thanks to DGG, since they have set up the Path of Exile Nexus store. Basically, you can support me by purchasing cosmetic armor sets for PoE, and I get a small cut of those proceeds, which, by the way, all goes directly back into this channel to help improve the content and grow our community. So if you're interested in purchasing an armor set in PoE, definitely check that link posted below, and you can get an added bonus of supporting the channel, all while getting that new fancy armor set that you've been wanting. And even if you guys aren't able to, absolutely no worries at all. I appreciate every one of you just for watching this guide and being a part of our awesome Path of Exile community. And back to the guide, we're first going to hop into Path of Building, then we're going to go over the skill tree and ascendancy choices, then we're going to go over the gem links, and lastly, the gear. The timestamps are, of course, linked below if you want to skip around to certain spots. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into it. Alright, so here we are in Path of Building. First and foremost, of course, you guys already know probably, go ahead and hit this import-export button. We're going to import from Pastebin. You're going to paste the POB Pastebin link that I have in the video description right here, hit import, and you're good to go. Alright, so let's go ahead and go back to the tree. So first thing, just so you guys know, I usually do have leveling tree paths down here. When you click this, it'll be like level 1 all the way up to level 100, but in here, this is an in-game build guide, so we're actually not going to have that. Like I said earlier, if you do want a leveling guide for Spectres, definitely check the link below for that guide, but this is mainly going to be for once you get into the high yellow tier maps, the red tier maps, and beyond. This is going to be what you want to do. And of course, the later that you get in with your points, they're really just going to be going into your cluster jewels. So you can pretty much finish this off around level 80, and then you just, from there plug all into your cluster jewels and then go to town there. So what we're going to do here is we're not going to go over every single node, but we're going to talk about the most important nodes here that kind of round out the build along with the cluster jewels. And then we'll go from there. So first and foremost, what do we have here? We are a Spectre build, of course. So one of the most important nodes that you're going to be picking up is, of course, Death Attunement, just for that +1 to maximum Spectres. We want as many Spectres as we can get. With our setup here, we do end up with 5 Spectres. And like I said earlier, we are using Syndicate Operative Spectres. And pro tip here, if you do not have this Spectre yet, you can do a couple things. You can find them in June missions, or if you really want to find them pretty easily, you can do 2 things. You can go to the general chat, which is global, you can do /global and then space and then 820. Go there, just ask for Syndicate Operatives, and I guarantee you somebody will be able to get you them. You go to their hideout, you're going to be able to take a Desecrate with you, you're going to Desecrate in their hideout, and then you're going to get your Spectre from there. It'll pop up. And then what I would say is definitely when you go back to your own hideout, definitely Desecrate a couple times so it locks to your hideout. You're going to want to do this every time you log back in, so it's going to lock to your hideout, so you don't have to go get them if they ever die for some reason. But I actually have never lost a single Spectre, so it's not too bad. Or you can go to the Spectre global chat, which is /global space 6666. That's another option if you want to get the Spectres. That one's a little bit better if you're getting kind of rarer Spectres, like, if you're using the crabs, or if you're using the new Spectres, the Gale Callers for ultimatums. You can grab those from the Global 6666. All right, perfect. So that is our Spectres. One of the other good things here to note is that we are using, I'll talk about it here in a second, but the gloves, the triad grips, the triad grips, and that is going to make all of your physical damage from your minions converted to cold damage, and that's because we have 4 green sockets. So with all of that, we're going to have a whole bunch of cold damage, and we're going to scale that by doing a whole bunch of things with, for example, elemental equilibrium, and also cold penetration and cold resistance shred, all that good stuff. But this adds so much damage to your build. As you can see here, watch this, 3.3 million up to 5 million. That's so much damage with this. And the reason that this is giving us so much damage is because we are attacking with 2 things. We're attacking with mainly our Storm brand, which is lightning damage. So the way elemental equilibrium works is you attack with, let's say, lightning damage, so they will actually get buffed and take less damage from lightning, but they'll take more damage from, say, cold or fire. And that's good because we're doing cold damage, so that really works for us. Now, we do use Frost Bomb in this build, so Frost Bomb actually does some cold damage, so that would actually be not good with elemental equilibrium. So what we did to combat that was go Avatar of Fire, so we actually do no cold damage. This makes it to where all of the damage that we deal is fire damage. So that Frost Bomb that you're putting on the ground will do 2 things. 1, it'll do fire damage, so it'll be perfect with elemental equilibrium, and 2, it'll also still shred all that cold resistance on the enemy, so it's doing 2 perfect things for us. It's giving us a whole bunch of DPS. Perfect, so that's elemental equilibrium. One of the other very important parts about the build here is Necromantic Aegis. Basically what this does is it allows your minions to take the stats from your shield, and this is fantastic because there's actually a budget option for the shield that we're going to use, and then there's a medium budget option, and then there's a min-maxed version. We'll talk about that in the gear, but it's nice to have, you know, from the low starter all the way up to the high in gear, and still be able to really use this node and get a fantastic amount of DPS. So this is really what this is for. It's just a whole bunch of DPS. Perfect. So moving on from there, we'll talk about our clusters. Actually, let's talk about our just our regular little jewels here first. So very small amount of life. I think this gives us what, a couple hundred life. It gives us about 300 life, so it's pretty good. And it's also pretty cheap as well. I got a max roll for 8%, and it's not that expensive at all. You definitely want to put it right here though. So definitely put it there. You'll get the most bang for your buck since you have all of this intelligence right here. Gives you a whole bunch of life. And then we're going up here, and this is a very, very good jewel. These are also pretty cheap this league since not many people are playing Spectres yet. Unending Hunger, so this is really, really good for mapping, and especially for doing like stuff like Harbinger farming or ultimatums. It's very, very good. And they're going to be getting Soul Eater, so they're going to be doing a ton of damage. So really good. It's a good pickup. It's a cheap pickup, and you're going to want to plug it in right here. One of the other more important things to talk about, which, you know, we might save for when we talk about our items, but it is this. We'll come back to it. That minion steal 8 to 12% or 8 to 12 additional fire damage is actually very important. So let's remember that when we talk about our flasks. Very good. So everything else is pretty standard here, though. It's just as much life as we can get and as much minion damage as we can get. It's pretty basic. Moving on to our large cluster jewels. We have 2 large cluster jewels in this build, and the ideal setup is Renewal and Vicious Bite. And Renewal being the top priority, and Vicious Bite being the second priority. You can just straight up buy these for about 2.5 exalts. You can try and craft it yourself as well. I just bought mine both for 2.5 exalts, easy peasy. You do want to get 8 passive clusters. If you get the 9 passive cluster, you're going to have to spend 1 extra point. So do try and get the 8 passive, but if you want to be cheap, you can get the 9 passive and it'd be totally fine. Just fine. So we're going to actually get 2 of those, like I said, Vicious Bite and Renewal. Perfect. You actually can get one of the other options is a Vicious Bite, Renewal, and Rotten Claws, and if you do that, it actually does this. You wouldn't have to click these. It would be Vicious Bite here, and Renewal would be here, and then Rotten Claws would be back here, so it actually saves you 2 points if you do that. Not a bad option. They're a little bit more expensive, so you don't have to do that, but just to let you guys know, for a more of a min-maxed option. For our medium cluster jewels, we're going to be getting 4 of the exact same thing. We're going to go with Precise Commander and Vengeful Commander on all 4 of them. Now these are really good places to pick up elemental resistances, also things like Dexterity, We are a little bit lacking on dexterity. It's not a huge issue. You can probably pick it up on some gear pieces. I would say mostly it's really good to get maybe some resistances here. I've tried to do that on a few of my pieces. Also chaos resistance. We're pretty low on chaos resistance in this build, which isn't a huge deal because we have so much regen, but it is nice to pick up if you can. And we're going to be getting, you can actually get 4 or 5 passives clusters for these. It doesn't matter because you can see this 5th one right here. Doesn't really matter. You can still just do 4. So 4 or 5 passives works for those just fine. Now, the next one here is, you can see we have a bunch of little small cluster jewels, and these are fantastic. These are actually what carry the defenses of the build, especially early on, and certainly it carries into the late game as well as far as defenses. Now, what we're going with is you can either get a 2 passive or a 3 passive, doesn't matter. 3 passives is more for when you're like 90 plus with your levels. Until then, you can get a 2 passive, you can get a 3 passive, really doesn't matter. But the big note here is Surging Vitality. So it gives a nice bit of life with 8%, gives you some nice regen as well. So between all my 4, I have 2% regen, which is not too bad. And then here's the big one though. Every 4 seconds, regenerate 10% of life over 1 second. We're stacking those. So we have every 4 seconds, we regenerate 40% of our life over 1 second. So every 4 seconds, we get a massive life regen boost. Massive, massive, massive. And basically the way that works is if you ever are taking damage, you could be like in the process of regenning within that 1 second. So it's fantastic. You'll notice sometimes you'll take some damage but just instantly regen all the way to full HP. It's a very, very good defensive option. So a nice defensive layer there that we added to the build with this. And it's nice because it also gives you some life kind of along the way. I chose to go with ones that have maximum life on there as well as some resistances. So you can see there I have plus 11 to maximum life. So 11 life plus 4, so it's way better than, you know, just getting something like this with just 5% life. You can get 4% life plus some extra stats, like some life or resistances. See this one over here, I got some life and a little bit of lightning resistances, so not too bad at all. So these are fantastic for defense. In my opinion, this is probably what made this build as a life version be viable for late game. And when I say late game, I mean, you know, the in-game boss farming, the tier 15, tier 16 map farming for the Delirious, you know, doing the King Harbingers, all that good stuff. This is what is allowing us to do that, no problem. We have a decent life pool. It's nothing too crazy. We've got about a 5.4 at level 100. It goes down to about 5.1 at level, I don't know, like 95-ish. So even then, it's still not too bad. We're regenerating so much. We do have, of course, max resistance. You're trying to get as much chaos resistance as possible, but you'll probably end up with about even, maybe even a little bit less. So that's not too bad. Could be better if you have better gear. Like I said, my gear is probably medium budget gear. So if I had min-max gear, this probably would be quite a bit higher, maybe about 30 to 40%. Perfect. So as you can also see here, before we move on, the full DPS. So 5 million DPS. Now, what does that mean? We actually have, it's 5 million DPS per Syndicate operative, like, projectile, and they come with 3 projectiles naturally, right? So that's a natural 15 million DPS. We're also using GMP. So with GMP, we get another 4. Okay, so that's 3 plus 4, and then we'll go over this a little bit later, but we actually can get another 2, so that's 9 projectiles, so 45 million DPS for about a 40x budget, which is not too bad for how much we're paying for how much we're getting, so not too bad at all. So that is really the tree itself. Let's go ahead and talk about the Ascendancy choices. All right, perfect. So the first one that we're going to be getting is, of course, Mindless Aggression. And nothing really crazy here, just some extra damage, some move speed, some cast speed, just some extra damage. Really, it's just a traveling point. The second points that you're going to be wanting to pick up is Unnatural Strength. This is so much damage, and also survivability for your minions when you're leveling up, because they're going to get extra life from the extra gems, gem levels. So really, really good there. And then the third one that you're going to be picking up as you level up is Commander of Darkness. It's very, very good for the elemental resistances that it gives you. Super good, especially in league start situations when you don't have the best of gear. Getting that extra elemental resistance helps you gear out a little bit easier. So really, really good. And then for our last points, we get Bone Barrier. Now, this is very good for defenses. This is another thing that helps us really kind of go over the top as far as being able to be considered a tanky enough build for all of this super in-game gaming. So grants level 20 bone armor. Basically what bone armor is a 2.2k shield that you're going to get every, I think it's every 4 seconds. So every 4 seconds you're going to get a shield that absorbs some damage. What I do is I would suggest you guys put that on your left click so it just automatically casts all the time when you're moving around and you don't have to even worry about it. That's also very good because it's going to be triggering your minion. It's a minion ability, so it's going to be triggering your, your jewels. That's like 20% increased chance or 20% increased damage if you used a minion skill recently. So that's pretty nice as well. We also do have 20% more minion life. Very, very good for minion survivability as well. One of the best things about this build also, by the way, guys, is that we don't have zombies. No more zombies dying, and that is the most annoying thing in the world, so no more of that. Like I said, my Spectres have not died even one time throughout this entire process of leveling this build, so you're never going to have any minions die ever again. So very, very nice. And that again is one of the big reasons that we are able to have such good defenses is bone barrier. Perfect. That is our ascendancies and that is our skill tree. So let's go ahead and move into our gem links. So we're going to start up at the top here with our race Spectre. And this is going to be in our helmet. We will of course cover our helmet in a little bit, but the helmet is very, very important. It's where a lot of our damage is coming from. We of course have a raised Spectre. We have greater multiple projectiles. We have Predator, which is fantastic for bossing, especially for boss killing in maps like the Feared, the Twisted, all those bosses where it's like the Maven fights where you have the 4, like the Breach Lords, the Guardians, all that good stuff. Because you can Predator, you can use Signal Prey and make all your minions target a single bad guy. So if they do that, you can damage that one guy a lot faster and get him out of there and move on to the next one. It really helps you being able to focus fire down. And then increase critical damage for the last one. I'm using that instead of Vicious Projectiles. That's just what I have chosen as my gem here. I'm not 100% sure on if I'm going to do Awaken Vicious Projectiles. I would definitely say unless you have Awaken Vicious Projectiles like high level, I would say increased critical damage is better, but if you have like Awaken Vicious Projectiles 5 or something like that, throw that in instead. But critical strike damage is the best for a little bit cheaper of a budget. So that's your 4 link, and that's going to be in your helmet, which we'll talk about here shortly. So let's go ahead and move on to our other links. In our weapon, now this is going to be in a weapon with trigger. So as you can see down there, trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill. That's very important, by the way. Try and get a weapon with that craft. That's a bench craft, and try and get one on there. It saves you so many clicks. It's a very huge quality of life boost. So we're going to use Desecrate, Flesh Offering, Frost Bomb. Just going to automate a lot of your build, so you're going to have a lot less clicks. And again, Frost Bomb is to shred that cold resistance. So very, very good. Moving on, we have our weapon 2. This is going to be in our shield. We have Stormbrand, Hex Touch, and Frostbite. Now, one interesting thing here is that I don't have Awaken Hex Touch. Okay, so that would be the... Here we go, Awaken Hex Touch. That is Awaken Hex Touch 5, by the way. Once you get to Awaken Hex Touch 5, you are able to, as you can see down there, supported skills can apply an additional curse. That is really where the Frostbite comes into play for bossing, because at that point, we can use Frostbite and Assassin's Mark. But until you get Awaken Hex Touch 5, you're only going to be using Frostbite for the most part instead of Assassin's Mark. So just note that as you're kind of leveling up your build and all that good stuff. So Stormbrand, by the way, just level 1, whatever, it doesn't even matter. Moving on to our next one here is our gloves, and like I said earlier, we have 4 green sockets in this, and that is 100% required in order to make the build work, because you want all your damage to be cold damage. So we're going with Dash, Second Wind. We do have Precision, which is going to be around level 10 to 12, depending on what your mana situation is. And then I threw in a Portal Gem in there as well. For our auras here, we have Hatred, and try and get a level 21 there for a little bit extra damage, Generosity, Bone Chill, and Skitterbots. Now for the Bone Chill, we're able to do that. I'll show you here in a little bit, but you might not be able to do that immediately up front, but this is the setup for basically, once you get into red tier maps, you'll be able to run Bone Chill, and that adds a lot of damage. Let's check here. So it adds about 500,000 damage, so pretty solid there. We already did Spectres. Let's move on to our ring. Now, this is interesting. You could kind of do whatever you want here. I would suggest Enduring Cry. I've played with it. I like it. It's like an extra life flask. It gives you, what, 2,000 life pretty quick. I think it's over 1 second. So it's like an extra life flask. Not required for general mapping. This is pretty closely tied to our setup for boss killing. We have a certain setup which is a little interesting, using a belt called the Umbilicus, which makes it to where we don't have any flasks. All of our flasks get applied to our minions. So in that case, you don't have a life flask. And in that case, Enduring Cry is almost required because it acts as basically a life flask. So do note that. I do include this in there because I'm switching between mapping and bossing all the time. So I have that in there just, for the life flask, and it saved me so many times. If you didn't have this, you'd be getting down to like, 200 life, and then you have to regen very slowly. But Enduring Cry, hit that, and it goes all the way back up to full. Pretty good. Summon Carrion Golem. This is going to be Carrion Golem Animate Guardian. This is your in your body armor, and this is your support minions. So you have a Carrion Golem. Doesn't have to be 21. You can have it level 20. Really doesn't matter. Feeding Frenzy. Again, Feeding Frenzy is just for the extra boost damage for your main Spectres. We have Animate Guardian, which we'll talk about in a second. We have our Awaken Melee Physical Damage. So if you don't have Awaken Melee Physical Damage yet, you don't need a 6 link. You can get a 5 link. You can leave this off. The reason you have Awaken Melee Physical is for a chance to intimidate. 10% increased chance to intimidate, which is 10% more physical damage taken, which is very good for our build. So if you have that, try and get the 6 link. If you don't have Awaken Melee Physical, don't worry about it. You're fine with a 5 link on your body armor. We do have Minion Life and Elemental Army, and that is just to make sure our dudes don't ever die. I think my Carrion Golem has died 1 time in all of my mapping, and I don't even think I've ever seen my Animate Guardian take damage. So pretty nice, because once you get him set up, you don't want him to die. So that kind of brings us to our Animate Guardian. What do we have going here? I do have a video if you want to check out, in detail how to set this guy up, but shorthand version, we have Kingmaker for the weapon. We have Mask of the Stitch Demon helmet. We have, what's it called? The Windscreen boots, and that is for +1 curse. We have any pair of gloves that give us vulnerability on hit, or I'm sorry, not vulnerability on hit. Scratch that. We have elemental weakness on hit for this one. The vulnerability on hit is for like a Carrion Golem build. So elemental weakness on hit. And if in order to do that, remember, you have to have those boots that have the +1 curse, or otherwise it's not going to work. And then for the chest piece, to combo with the Mask of the Stitch Demon helmet, we are going to get a chest piece with, I choose ones that have nearby enemies are blinded, and then make sure that you can craft on there, it's a prefix, the 10% of maximum life as extra maximum energy shield. If you get that combos with the Mask of the Stitch Demon helmet, long story short, to make it to where the Animate Guardian regens life like crazy. So if he ever takes any damage, it regens to full almost instantly. So very good combo there. And that is how you set that up. Like I said, video in the description if you want to know a little bit more details on the Animate Guardian setup. And this will never die, by the way, I guess, guys. It's never going to die. So once you set it up, you're good to go. Same thing with your Spectres. Same thing with your Carrion Golem. It might die in the beginning if you're leveling up, but it's really not a big deal. And like I said, mine's only died 1 time. So I like that a lot better than Carrion Golem builds where you have all those zombies that die all the time, man. And it's so annoying. Even in ultimatums, we're good to go. Our dudes don't ever even get close to dying. And in our second unset ring, we have Convocation, which, by the way, personal tip, I actually put that on my space bar, and I have my thumb kind of just sitting on the space bar, and it's auto casting all the time. And it's really important for Syndicate Operatives because having them positioned right gives them the most amount of damage possible because they can shotgun with their abilities. So like I said, that 5 million DPS, that's per 1 projectile. If you position them right in front of the boss in the right way, you can shotgun all of their shots, and that's how they take that 45 million DPS. So Convocation is very important for that. Like I said, it's on my thumb, on my spacebar, auto casting all the time. Works pretty well. Perfect, so that is our gem links. Let's go ahead and move on to our items. And we're going to basically go over all of the items here, and there's a couple items that I'm going to point you guys to different crafting videos that I have made, and I'll explain some of the items just as we go here, but for the most part you guys should be able to kind of, you know, take a look here and see what you need, and I'll also try and give you guys prices about how much I spent on these. And almost I spent crafting these, so you can get, like, again, get an idea of how much you're going to be spending with this build, and also the budget versions of some items. So this is the wand. I actually spent 16 exalts purchasing this wand. I think you can get wands with just +1 to all spell, +1 to all minion, and that trigger socketed spell, which is a suffix by the way, for about 5 to 6 exalts. So honestly, not too bad for a starter wand. That's going to be a ton of damage for about 5 exalts. And then that hatred aura effect was very, very good. I was happy about that. Like I said, I purchased this for 16. The better ones will have something like, you know, minion damage and also minion attack speed. Those can be pretty expensive, you know, upwards of 20 exalts, 25 exalts, and the ones that we're used to seeing with the, you know, the temple mod, the 66% minion damage and 5% chance to do more damage or double damage, those are very expensive right now. So if you do want that, you can check out the video description below. I have a link to a crafting guide on how to make this if you want to create it yourself. You will save a little bit of currency, but honestly, unless you're going for a big boy wand, I would suggest just purchasing this and not crafting it yourself. Moving on to the weapon. Now, I did craft this myself, super easy. It's basically the cost of an Awakener's Orb. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to get 2 different shields. You're going to get one shield with +2 to minimum frenzy, and you're going to get a second shield with +2 to minimum power. Now, you do want to make sure you do this on a energy shield base item so that you have the chance of rolling cold damage. It's probably not going to happen when you Awakener's Orb, but it is a chance to actually happen, and that would be fantastic if you were able to get cold damage as well. But basically what you're aiming for here is the +2/+2, and then able to craft on there the bench craft of gain 8% of cold damage as extra chaos damage. It's basically an 8% more multiplier, and like I said, that's going through Necromantic Aegis on the tree, so our minions are directly benefiting from that, not us. We basically have no shield, our minions have that shield, and it is a ton of damage. Let's see here, Victario's Charity. This is the shield that you could do as a budget option. This thing is literally 1 chaos. This is very good for mapping. Basically, if you get this and you have the Necromantic Aegis, your minions and yourself will actually have full frenzy and power charges pretty much all the time. The only downside is you don't get it for bosses. And then of course you're not getting that 8% more damage either. So very, very good for mapping. It's a super cheap, you know, 1 chaos instead of crafting this is probably, you know, what, 2.5 to 3 exalts, basically the cost of an Awakener's Orb. So even that is not too expensive. The end game item here would be the +2/+2, 8% of cold damage, extra chaos damage. You would also want maybe some cold damage on there, and even 1% increased damage per block chance, so that's another 25% damage. That would be the big boy shield that you could work towards for your min-max item. For your helmet, here is the big boy helmet that's giving us a lot of damage. It's a little bit harder to craft this league compared to last league with Harvest, and when I say that, it's different to craft because we're not able to get the same helmet that we got last league. We are no longer going to be able to get also critical strike chance on there for our minions. We were able to get 100% crit chance on our Spectres. This league we're capping out at about 70%, which still isn't bad. But it's just a little bit harder to actually do this. You also can't target craft the hypothermia as easily as last league, where you could just augment cold and you could get it extremely easy. So you can either purchase this yourself. I purchased this myself for 23 exalts after having crafted a whole bunch myself and failing at them, but getting good ones and then selling them. So that's what I would suggest you guys do. Attempt to craft this yourself using bound fossils. Okay, so you're actually going to get a Shaper and an Elder helmet, and you're going to Awakener's Orb them together. Now what I would suggest doing is get one with the minion damage, socketed by 20 minion damage, and then get a second one with 20 hypothermia. and then Awakener's Orb those together, and pray to RNGesus that you just get +3 to socket and minion gems. I've heard it happen, and it's fantastic if that happens, and you're done. Most likely that's not going to happen, and from there you're going to have to use bound fossils. So just slam, 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 slam over and over until you get something like this. One of the options that you could do is you could get +3 to socket and minion gems, and then +20 to minion damage, and then you could say, if you had an open prefix, maybe you could craft on like that life there, and then you could re-roll keep prefixes, or re-roll suffixes, keep prefixes. If you did that with harvest crafting, I think those are about 1x a piece. Do that until you get hypothermia, and you might even get lucky and get the crit chance on there. But from me testing it in Craft of Exile, it's about 1 in 5-ish chances is pretty much what I was seeing. So maybe at about 5 to 6 exalts to get that hypothermia once you have gotten the +3 and then the 20 minion damage. So there's a couple ways you can do it, or of course just be like me and attempt to craft it, not be successful, and then buy it based off of, you know, making so much currency from selling the other helmets. The helmets that I sold were all like, you know, +3 to socket and minion gems, and then +20 to minion life, and then some lives, some resistances, stuff like that. Those are really good for carrion golem builds, so you could sell those for 5, 10, 15 exalts, and then make it up and then be able to purchase this. So that's what I did. I would suggest you guys do that. So pretty good helmet. I'm happy with that helmet. Body armor, I actually bought this for 1 exalt. It's a poo-poo body armor. It's basically, the big thing that you want here is just maximum number of Spectres and being able to either have life on it or craft some life on it yourself. I wasn't even trying to go for a 6 link on this. I just got lucky. I was trying to go for a 5 link and I got a 6 link. So not too bad. You can most likely, most of you guys will have better chest pieces than me here. But life and maximum number of Spectres, that's the big deal there. The gloves we already talked about. Triad grips, this is converting 100% of our physical to cold damage. And then make sure you get the 4 greens there. And check out my video, also linked below. It's a tip on how to get 4 greens on this item, because it is an armor energy shield item, which normally doesn't roll a lot of greens, but there's a trick where you can do it to make it a lot easier on yourself, and you're not spending thousands of chromatic orbs. That's absolutely not what you should be doing. So check that video if you don't already know how to do that trick with the chromatic orbs. For our boots, I do have pretty good boots here, and I could Maven Orb them, but I am scared, so I'm not going to do that for a little bit here. So the big thing that we're wanting here is just, you know, +1 to level of raised Spectre gems. We're getting that everywhere that we can. We want to raise the level of our Spectre gems as much as possible. I think mine are at 30 right now, and that's doing 2 things. Obviously more damage, but also more life for your Spectres. Like I say, mine never die anymore because they have such high life. I also have a little bit of movement speed there, and I have tier 1 life on there, and this is very important. If you're doing stuff like Maven or Uber Elder, then put on Cannot Be Frozen. If you're not, then it's not as important, but I was doing Maven fights just over and over and over and over and over, and that is required to do Maven fights, is the Cannot Be Frozen, so keep that in mind. Obviously you can get the upgrade here would be +2 to raise Spectre gems, and that's through a Maven Orb. So I technically could Maven Orb this right now, and I would have a 50% chance of getting it or 50% chance of bricking it, and I just don't feel the need. I'm already pooping on all the bosses in the game, so I'd rather not brick my item. But that would be a min-maxed version of the boots. And honestly, what are the other boots called? They're the super bone something. You guys know what I'm talking about. There's some boots that are like actually poo-poo boots that you can get from like level 5, but they have +1 to Spectre levels. I wish I could remember what it was called, but I can't remember. Bones of Uller, there it is. So you could get these technically if you really wanted to. 20 life, it's a little bit of move speed. You could probably get 15% move speed, and then +1 to level of our raised Spectre gems. You could probably pick this up for 1 chaos if you really wanted to. That is a super cheap budget option. Moving on to our amulet, I self-crafted this myself. You guys can certainly craft this pretty easily as well. It's the cost of an Awakener's Orb. So I think I paid about 4 exalts total in order to craft this. Getting an amulet with +1 to level all intelligence skill gems is going to cost you about 1 exalt, or you can craft it yourself for probably about an exalt worth of alterations. And then you're going to take that, and you're going to take another amulet with Hatred Has you know, 20, I think it's what, 22 to 25% reduced reservation is the tier 1 roll. And you want to awaken or absorb those together, and again, pray to RNGesus that you get something good here. I was lucky here. I got, you know, 32 to all attributes, a little bit of resistances, and I was able to craft on there some life. So I'm pretty happy about this. For the anointment, definitely go with a Ravenous Horde for some extra damage. We don't need minion survivability because they never die anyway, so getting as much damage is the best thing to do here. So Ravenous Horde, perfect. The most important thing here, by the way, is the Hatred has 25% reduced reservation. That is what is allowing us to run Bone Chill on our Skitter bots. If you don't have that, you're not able to run Bone Chill. So just keep that in mind. It's okay to not have that, but just make sure you turn off Bone Chill on your Skitter bots. Perfect. Moving on to ring 1 and 2. These are very similar. Basically what I was doing here is they're unset rings. Both of them are unset rings. I'm just getting as much life and resistances as possible, as you can tell on both of those here. And on this one I did need a little bit extra dex, so I got some dex. I don't think I need that anymore for my current setup. So yeah, okay, so I need 117 dexterity. So I think what did I get? Almost exactly that. Let's check. Ring, death spiral. Pretty close. So you're probably gonna have to get dexterity on 1 or 2 of your items, so do keep that in mind. Other than that though, like I said, just life and resistances as much as possible. Okay, perfect. So moving on to the belt. Now this is pretty interesting. This is the bossing setup. Okay, the bossing setup. I would not use this if you are regular mapping. I'll show you the mapping setup here in a second. It's much cheaper as well. But this is it's probably about the same. There's actually 3 options that you can do for belts. This is the bossing one. So Umbilicus, flask apply to your Spectres instead of you. So all of these flasks here are not going to apply to me, they're going to apply to our Spectres. This is literally gives us double damage almost. So 5 million, let's take it off. 2 points, it's literally double damage. That's insane. Okay, so let's put that back on. So much damage. Taste of Hate, 20% of physical as extra cold. Very good for our build. Cinder Swallow, this is what's important. Definitely get one with critical strike chance, by the way. So 75% critical strike chance. Now, if you're interested, so enemies ignited by you during flask effect take 10% increased damage. So it's a 10% more damage multiplier. That is why I said that we were going to come back to this. That is why we have one jewel like this. Minions deal any amount of fire damage. It could be like the worst roll possible, 1-to-1 fire damage. They just need to do a little bit of fire damage, and since they're critting all the time, you will always be able to ignite. Okay, so if they're ignited, then they're now taking that 10% items, 10% more damage multiplier. So pretty solid there. At Zeri's Promise, just for a whole bunch of extra that actually double dips. So try and get the highest physical and elemental damage roll. It double dips. Now this one is also pretty big. Skills fire 2 additional projectiles. So basically this is giving me 10 million DPS. Pretty crazy. If you are convocating in front of a boss and it's shotgunning and that boss is taking all of the damage from all projectiles. Very good here. Moving on. Now this is very important as well. Let's see how much the damage increases on this. 5 million down to 3.7 million. Look at that. Insane. So this was a crazy flask as well. So your critical strike chance is lucky. A diamond flask, and on top of that we get increased attack speed during flask effect. So I think you get up to 12% here, so I could technically upgrade this a little bit. So all of these are so much damage. This is the bossing setup. This is how I'm able to one-shot basically every boss in the game, insta-phase every single boss. It's because I'm running this. Now what we could do, I have this in my build, but I honestly don't suggest it right now. I have a Torrance Reclamation. These things are so expensive right now, which is kind of ridiculous. I think I purchased mine for 6 exalts, but they're upwards of 20 right now. If you got the cash, sure, you can spend it. It is very good. I think the biggest thing about this is the aura that it gives you move speed, as well as your minions give move speed, so you're able to map a lot faster. So that's why I do like it, but if I didn't have it right now, I would not be spending 20 exalts on it. What I would be doing is doing a Darkness Enthroned right here. Let's just see the damage output right here. So we're at 3.1 million, so we can put in, let's do this one, And this one, so yeah, it's actually a little bit more DPS than the Torrent's Reclamation. Okay, so you actually get a little bit more DPS, but you're losing the clear speed because you're not zooming around like a crazy person. So that's the trade-off. I would say probably most people, you guys should be trying to go for the Darkness Enthroned instead of Torrent's Reclamation. Perfect. Let's go ahead and put our Umbilicus back on. We've already talked about most of these jewels. I'll just kind of go over this one last one that we didn't talk about, which is this guy right here. So this is an ideal example of what your jewel should look like. So some life, minion steal, increased damage if you used a minion skill recently. Not necessarily the elemental resistance, but of course that is nice, or even maybe like chaos resistance. But the main thing there at the end is minion steal, physical, extra physical damage, as high of a roll as possible there. So life, increased damage, and then increased physical damage. Those are the most important stats there. Obviously, if you can get something like taunt on hit, blind on hit, those are also fantastic as well. Perfect. I think that is pretty much all that we have here for the items, and that about rounds out the build, guys. I hope you guys do try this out. Honestly, I really am kind of telling everybody at this point, jump ship on carrion golems. It's not that they're bad, but I think that once you get to this point in the league, when we're 30% of the way through the league, I think everybody has enough currency to go ahead and make the switch. The biggest expense item here is the helmet, and like I said, I started out with a +1 to level of socketed gems and +18 minion damage, and I had them in there, and I was clearing tier 16 maps no problem, guys. So you don't need like a 20x 30x helmet. You can use one a lot cheaper that you can self-craft yourself using bound fossils on an elder helmet, and you could be just fine. Make sure you get the triad grips, go through all those other budget items that I was talking about. I guarantee you can do this build for under 15, probably under even 10 exalts. Because if you don't even need necessarily the 6 link for the chest piece, you just need the number +1 to number of specters. You can get a 5 link, you can craft that yourself. Yeah, under 10 exalts, no problem. And you're probably doing about 20 million DPS instead of 45 million DPS. So that's more than enough to clear all the content in the game. I think at that point, it's just, the boss fights might take a little bit longer, whereas once you upgrade, you're insta-phasing them. That's really the difference. But yeah, that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it did teach you guys some things, maybe reinvigorated your spark wanting to go back to Spectres. I know a lot of people have been stuck on carrion golems for a few leagues. Hey, I was one of them too. I still love carrion golems. There's nothing wrong with them, but they did get the nerf bat, which makes me sad. It hurts my heart. But at the same time, it made us revisit the Spectres, and the Spectres are doing great. They didn't get any nerfs. They got some very minor nerfs, but they're doing great. Tons of damage. I think the addition of these small cluster jewels with the surging vitality really took the build to the next level as far as defenses. And I do think that, by the way, you guys can craft these super easily yourself. Like, you don't even have to purchase these. I crafted 2 of these myself for probably under 30-40 chaos, just using alterations, because that's all you need on there, surging vitality. Super easy. You can make this build super cheap, clear all the content, you can put some extra currency into it, start slaying some in-game bosses. It really does everything, and I cannot suggest it enough, guys. That's all I got on this one. If you guys did enjoy this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.